All right, well, you're hearing it here first. And no, this is not a joke. The UK has set to approve experiments to dim the sun within a couple of weeks. And guess who might be behind much of the funding and the ideology? None other than Bill Gates. I mean, how many times do we have to talk about this guy? I've got some quotes from Bill Gates. I've got some connections between the UK and people that Bill has worked with, has funded, has cited over the past 15 plus years. I believe he is behind what we are going to see in the UK, which could have lasting catastrophic consequences because, as we all should know, and maybe these people do know and maybe they don't, but when you try to play God, there's always going to be a consequence. Guys, I'm Shane Winnings. Welcome to the channel. I aim to give a biblical worldview of a world that is not so biblical. Let's get into it. Welcome, welcome. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button, hit the like button, help us get this message out on this Sunday night, and leave a comment where you're watching from or what you think. What do you think? Should we be messing with geoengineering? Should we be trying to dim the sun? Do you even believe in global warming and climate change? I don't believe it. I think it's a power grab, and we've talked about it so many times before, and we are just seeing it happen again. Now, I will say that all attempts to do this have been canceled or blocked by protests, and I'm praying that this falls in that same arena. Now, this stuff is really, really interesting to people. That's why I want to cover it, because it's man trying to play God, and as a human being, as a citizen of the earth, I'm concerned. As a Christian, I'm concerned. As a preacher, I think we need to be raising awareness of what the global elites are doing. And I would call Bill Gates a global elite. I mean, he's one of the richest men on the entire face of the planet. And when I cover topics like this, they get a lot of traction, which also means I get to give a biblical worldview of something that people are already hearing a lot about. You guys remember 3 months ago, I did a video on the global fog. Do you guys remember that? Didn't it just kind of disappear? But it seemed like it wasn't just here in Florida or here in America, but it was all over the world. Around the same time, there was this crazy fog. People were testifying it had a smell to it. Of course, there were conspiracy theorists saying that it had been tested in a lab and it had chemicals in it. I was never able to find any sources on that. And so what I love about telling the truth, and hopefully what you love about this channel, is that I will tell you what's actually going on without feeding into a lie. Like if I find out that something's not true, I'm going to tell you we were not able to source it. But guess who was behind some of these crazy patents? Well, it was Bill Gates. And here we are again in 2025, and we're talking about him for good reason. Now, back in 2010, this is a direct quote from Bill Gates. He said, quote, "If we do get to a point where we're desperate enough about global warming, we should have thought through what we're going to do about it. And things like cloud brightening or putting particles in the stratosphere, those are things that we should understand the unintended consequences of, have a governance structure in place for, so that if it does come to that, we can make a rational decision." So he's already 15 years ago planting the idea, cloud seeding. He's planting the seed of like, hey, this is a last-ditch effort, but if we get here, we should have some rules in place. And guess what? That's the case. A spokesperson for Bill Gates named John Pinette said that Bill views geoengineering as an important avenue for research and also clean forms of energy. And again, you look at the global elites, you look at people like AOC, who will go on Instagram Live and yell at you about, going electric when she has a gas stove in the background. Like, give me a break, dude. No one's listening to you. But here's some context. Since 2007, so for the last 18 years, Gates has provided at least $4.5 million to these efforts, managed by a man named Ken Caldera, who's from the Carnegie Institution, and David Keith from the University of Calgary and later Harvard. Now, they study and they funded studies, Bill Gates funded studies of stratospheric aerosols, or SAI, and cloud brightening, known as MCB, as well as carbon capture. Recipients included Caldera, Keith, and a man named Armand Nukermans, who does things with the cloud brightening spray systems. So this is something that has been ongoing for the last 18 years. And I will tell you that some of these names are involved in what is happening right now in the UK. So when we start to trace back, Bill Gates seems to always be at the root of these conversations, even though the public, even though websites, even though media will report Bill Gates is not involved. If you actually take 30 minutes to do some reading, you will see that everything traces back to him or his money. Speaking of his money, in 2016, up until last year, and I'm sure it's still ongoing, we just haven't got the report yet, Bill Gates has been funding Harvard's solar geoengineering research program, or SGRP. And he has listed as a donor since 2006. And he has gotten a briefing from David Keith, who's one of the lead researchers in this space. And he began to fund Keith and Caldera to further their research. You are going to hear these names again as we dive into what's happening in the UK. Let's get into that right now. Okay, I'm going to show you the official document that's got the program thesis and a ton of context right here. You can find this online at aria.org.uk. That's aria.org.uk. And it's all here for you to read. And I mean, it's a whole thing. But let me give you the down and dirty, basically, of what this consists of. I copied the entire document. I threw it into AI and I said, tell me about this. I read through some of it myself, but it's so wordy. There's so many different things going on that I'm like, why don't I just have AI break it down? And that is where I like using AI. Let me say this as a preface. I'm not a fan of purely going to AI and say, tell me about something. Well, if you do that, then you need to back it up with your own research, because especially if you do that in terms of biblical stuff, it's going to give you its own slant on things, its own perspective. And I've done it as a test, and it's been wrong in some instances. It's had the wrong context for a situation that happened in the Bible, or it's given the wrong context for a verse. This is why it's problematic. And I saw this about a year ago when people said, oh, what about these pastors that are using AI to make sermons? I'm like, dude, that is not Holy Spirit inspired. That is not you as a man of God sitting down, spending time in the Word, getting a revelation from the Lord. That's you lazily going to AI and saying, hey, tell me about something. Now, where I think it can be beneficial is if you have all of the information, you've got a revelation, but you want AI to sort it for you, or you want it to summarize it, or you want it to find some, trends or highlights. You plug something into a system like Grok or like ChatGPT, and you say, hey, tell me about this. Give me bulleted points about this issue, or find me some recurring themes, or is there any link between this and this? Then it can just sift through the data and find it. But if you're trying to use it to get a revelation or something like that, it's messed up. And sadly, we're going to see a generation who is using ChatGPT to pass law school, and then their first client's going to get sentenced to death row because, as it turns out, you actually need to have some human knowledge. Computers will never replace humans because that's not how God intended it. So I say all that to say, I read over this. I plugged the link into ChatGPT and I said, hey, please analyze this document and tell me what it's about. And then I said, relate it to Bill Gates. And it's pretty cool what it spit out, so I'll tell you what it said. The document, Exploring Options for Actively Cooling the Earth by ARIA, outlines a $66 million program for solar radiation management research, focusing on small-scale, controlled experiments to study approaches like stratospheric aerosol injection, which is like cloud seeding, but they might do it at a higher level. They're going to inject aerosol into the stratosphere. It's just what it means. And marine cloud brightening. It says, I will analyze links to Bill Gates, including mentions and indirect connections through cited research, funding networks, or overlapping research communities as requested. So it says right off the bat, there is no explicit mention of Bill Gates. However, the Fund for Innovative Climate and Energy Research, FICER, is something that Bill Gates has been a part of, as well as Harvard's Solar Geoengineering Research Program, SGRP, as we stated earlier. But here's some indirect connections that I think were pretty interesting. And we're not going to spend a crazy amount of time breaking all this down, but I just want you to see how this guy is weaseling his way into everything. And if you really want to know how sinister he is, go back on my channel and watch the other videos of Bill Gates. I've already painted a clear picture of why he is an evil human being. I talked about how he was putting vaccines in mosquitoes. That is not a conspiracy. That was happening in Africa, and they were trying to use it to cure, I believe it was malaria. Then we talk about some of the patents that he's been a part of. Then we talk about some of the other things. It's openly out there available for the public. You know, the news was reporting on cloud seeding and injecting aerosol and pieces of metal to refract light and just crazy stuff that is happening in our world. And if you're unaware of it, you're going to be living under a rock. You're going to have no idea. And I think as Christians, we need to be informed. We've got to be aware. Then we know what to pray for. And we also know when someone's trying to pull the wool over our eyes. And we realize that the world is not as great as we thought it was when we were growing up. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I thought that, you know, people were mostly trustworthy. I thought that, you know, the people at the top, they wanted our best, they had our best interests in mind. And I'm talking about when I was a kid. You know, I used to think that the government was trustworthy. I used to think the FBI was awesome. And I pray that we return there, and I hope under our current leadership we do. But the point I'm making is the older I get, the more I realize, man, the Bible's true. Like, the heart of man is wicked. And when we see what Gates has done, the way he's trying to play God, the way he wants to depopulate the earth, you know, and he says if we do a good job, we can get it down 10% or whatever he said. Crazy stuff that he said. Now we're talking about dimming the sun. I'm sorry, what did God say to Job? Oh, where were you? Where were you when I created everything? Where were you when I hung the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets? Like, when I formed the galaxy and the cosmos, were you there? But now you have Bill Gates, who doesn't have any opinion on God whatsoever. He thinks that science, as we progress, is replacing the need for God. And he is playing God by saying this incredible created star that heats our entire planet and that our entire solar system revolves around, we are going to try to dim it down a little bit because it's affecting our Earth. Yeah, I don't think so. Here's a couple of researchers and publications that are linked with Gates through his funding of geoengineering research. And Caldera. Caldera is cited in 3 sources in this document. He's cited on the timing of maximum warming after CO2 emissions. He is cited as a co-author on time lags in warming, and he is also cited on regional climate responses. Now, Gates' connection to Caldera, he is a prominent researcher of SRM. He has received nearly $400,000 annually for geoengineering studies from Gates, including SAI, which is the aerosol injection, and cloud brightening. He co-created FICER, which FICER, if you remember, is the, what does that stand for again? Fund for Innovative Climate and Energy Research. So he co-created it with David Keith in 2007 and contributed to Gates's funded reports, such as the 2009 Novum study and the 2011 Royal Society report on SRM. That was partially funded by Gates with $300,000. And so AI says that there is moderate strength that Gates is connected to this through Caldera. Now let's look at Keith. Keith is cited also 3 times on the uncertainty in SRM research, advocating for SRM field experiments, and designing field experiments. He has a strong connection with Gates, receiving funding from Gates, being cited as an advocate for these experiments, closely aligned with ARIA's program. And all of this is, again, backed by Gates, not only his funding, but some of his original ideas. So what does this mean as we kind of wrap up here? Well, I think it is gravely concerning, and I don't say that lightly. This stuff has been met with severe opposition, as it should, because we don't know the long-term impacts of doing something like this. We do not know the long-term impacts of trying to dim the sun and what that's going to do to our solar system. What is that going to do to our planet Earth? What's it going to do as far as agriculture goes? Is it going to throw off our ecosystem? What if it causes a drought somewhere? They talked about this having a negative impact on the Amazon, and that millions and millions and millions of people will suffer if it has an adverse reaction. What happens also, you've got to think of these implications. What if you're trying to play God over your country, but then something happens in another country? Like, what if something happens and we cause, like, Russia or China or some other country to experience negative reactions in their ecosystem? Now all of a sudden, we're getting in a war because we have totally messed with, the way that the sun is affecting the people are just not thinking. I think we should just leave the sun alone. I think we should not try to create clouds. I think we should not try to brighten them. I think we should not inject things into the sky. It's harmful for human beings. And I am sure when you and I are dead and we're long gone, there will be studies that are done on our generation, and they will say they used to inject things into the sky, and then they found out that it caused this, this, and this. I just believe that chemtrails are harmful for our society. I believe that trying to dim the sun and play God is harmful for our society. When you look at every single time man has tried to play God, there have been dire consequences. Even look at the issue of, a woman terminating a pregnancy. When you play God, there are consequences. The child always dies. Sometimes the woman dies, but she always will live with the scars and the mental scars and the trauma of what she has done. And our generation is suffering because of people who have tried to play God, because we think we know what's better, and we want to interject ourselves, and we want to disrupt what God has designed and say we know how to do it better. I think it's feeble-minded thinking. I think it's actually low IQ thinking. And I think that when we step back and we trust God as the creator, as the author and giver of life, then we will not try to put our hands in every single thing that's happening. I mean, this is no small deal. We're not talking about, dimming a light, We're talking about dimming the sun. The sun. And when you really do research into, like, fine-tuning, you will see that, if we were 1 degree off, if we were an inch closer to the sun or an inch further away, we'd burn up or we'd be in an ice age. If we were a degree off, like, fine-tuning is absolutely phenomenal. It's incredible. It shows that the universe was created, that Earth was created with such specific detail. It had to be by the hand of a creator, and it had to be on purpose. And so when you get man, who is inherently evil, whose heart is desperately wicked and deceitful, and is trying to mess with things that are outside of our grasp, like the sun, I'm telling you, it's not going to go well. So let me know what you think in the chat of all of this, but it is just another reason to not trust geoengineering or solar geoengineering, and definitely another reason to keep your eyes on Bill Gates, because he is not to be trusted. All right, guys. Well, that's it for tonight. Not a long live stream, but I wanted you to see what's happening in the world, because before we know it, this could be in our backyard, but not if we speak up. Let me say this before we end. Maybe you saw it earlier, but there was going to be a child sex camp, literally a child sex ed camp at the University of Colorado Boulder. And it was put on by this wellness, it was basically a pregnancy center, an abortion center. And because all of us raised our voices, they canceled the event. When Bill Gates has tried to do these things in the past, they have been canceled because there has been an outcry. So you might say, why are you doing a video like this? You're a preacher. Because if you're aware, then you can join me in lifting our voices up and saying, not on my watch. And maybe we could see this one canceled as well. Because when people start to play God with our planet, more people than just them are going to suffer. And so for the sake of those who might reap the consequences of these actions, I encourage you, please like this video, share this video, raise your voice. And I believe with enough pushback, we can stop anything. So in prayer, we will seek God and believe for a supernatural response. But in the natural, let's raise our voice and let's at least be people who said, I didn't sit by and do nothing. I raised my voice. I made a fuss. I said that it's not going to happen on my watch. That's how I want to go out. How about you? All right, guys. God bless. We'll see you next time. We'll definitely see you in the morning, bright and early, for another day of Bible in a year. Come on, come join us. You're not too far gone. You know, it's not even May yet. You can still catch up. You can read through the Bible in a year with us. Go back, start on day one, watch a couple a day. You'll be caught up before you know it. Let's read the Bible together. Amen. All right, guys, have a great night. God bless.